Royal Standley of Oregon Pacific Financial Advisors, offering securities through United Planner Financial Services. Member FINRA SIPC shares his planning approach to help people toward a place where they may be at peace regarding their financial goals. In this dynamic podcast, Royal will share his insights on how to design a retirement plan to help you plan for your future. Now, on to the show.
Hello and welcome to Life by Design with Royal Standley from Oregon Pacific Financial Advisors. Today we're going to be talking about tips for the recent college grad. Good afternoon, Royal. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing today?
Doing fantastic. I love this. I love helping the young people. I know you do too. And I'm sure there are a lot of good positive tips for college grads and then some pretty bad tips. And we're going to focus on the good ones, right, today?
That's right. We'll touch on the bad and encourage people to avoid those pitfalls that we see over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. Just traps. There are definitely some traps out there, and I know we're going to teach them how to jump over them or sidestep them or just avoid them altogether. So where do we start today with this topic?
Well, I think the first part of once you graduate from college, figuring out where that next step is. Most people are going to go right into starting their career. Maybe you take off the summer, maybe you travel a little bit. But what I want to look at is that first kind of 3 months in that new job and your runway of getting that first job and what that looks like for people, because I think that's such an important starting point. Now, we were talking a little earlier about this. It's not like the old days where you would graduate and you would go to work in a factory and that's where you would be for the next 40 years. Mm-hmm. Just not the world we're living in right now. I think there's some real positives there. And also, I think there's a little less security than what, some of our parents might have had in the past.
No, absolutely. I think there's a lot to be said about corporations and how they treat their employees, right? I mean, there used to be pensions and there used to be a lot of loyalty from the corporation to the employee and vice versa. The employee was loyal to the corporation because there were things in place that would reward you for being there for 30, 40, 50 years. But as you know, and you've talked about on other podcasts, that the pension has kind of gone the way of the dodo. And there's not a whole lot of companies out there that are doing it. And a lot of companies downsize people due to them earning too much or getting too old, quote unquote. And it's hard to see loyalty happening from an employee to a corporation when there's that fear out there. And I don't know, Roy, what do you think? Is it a justified fear or is it something that maybe the media has blown up or what have you seen?
Oh, I think it's absolutely a justified fear. Unless you're working for an organization, let's say like the government, there are just so many things that could happen to a corporation, a family-owned business, whatever that is. So many things can happen that are just out of your control.
True.
So I think the biggest thing that a young person needs to look at there when they're going out to start their career is that you might work for a few different companies or businesses over your career. But the thing to remember is you're always working for yourself. Mm-hmm. You have to think of yourself as almost as a business of how are you going to generate revenue to cover all the things that you want to do in life. Buying a house, saving for the future, vacations, starting a family, whatever those priorities are in your life, you need to look at your career as a way of financing those things.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great point.
And so the first thing I would say is going into your 20s, depending on the type of degree you might have or the direction you want to go in your career, I would really encourage people to use their 20s as a way of exploring and trying things that they might have always wanted to have. I think there used to be this idea that you had to work for 40 years, get to retirement, and then do the things that you always wanted to do. Mm-hmm. I think in this day and age, there's definitely some opportunities. If you have a curiosity or an interest in something, your 20s is a great way of, just getting a taste of that to see if there's something that you're truly passionate about there. And because you're just starting off, and as long as you follow some, basic tips so you don't rack up a lot of debt or destroy your credit score or just kind of waste your time going down what could be a fruitless path, I think it's a great time to go out there and just explore what really interests you there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's amazing because when you and I were kids, and not to date us both, but I don't remember really hearing about adults going back to college or taking courses and things like that. And I think that because of all the online schooling and all the virtual colleges and different types of programs that even the larger universities are allowing for adult education, I think that's really changed the game. So when you're in a career and you're in a field necessarily, and you're thinking about switching, you can do some schooling outside of your normal work, and it doesn't interrupt the income coming in. It's just something additional you have to plan for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's so many opportunities out there that you don't have to feel that once you graduate from college or high school, that first job has to carry you through the next 40 years.
Absolutely.
So I would say one of the biggest things I can recommend to somebody is to really take, not just 15 minutes at Starbucks, but really take a day or two to really sit down and kind of meditate on what it is that you want out of your life and what you want out of your career. I just really think that that's invaluable. I don't think enough people kind of take that time to sit back and look at what they've accomplished up to this point, and then begin making that plan towards the future of where they want to go. What are those things that are just going to be important for their lives? And also, I think just as importantly, what are the things that aren't that important for you? Not everyone wants to have, the security of, for instance, owning their own home or starting a family at this point in their career, but might be feeling a lot of pressure from family to do these things. And I think it's an excellent way of really figuring out what you want. And, that separation there between high school and college is kind of the first time you really have that freedom to kind of take a breath and go, okay, what do I want? Once you're done with college, then the world really just opens up from there. There is no more institution at that point telling you where to be or what class you have to do to achieve this goal of graduation or a certificate. So taking that moment to take a breath and really evaluate things is excellent for that period of time between graduation and getting your first job. And I think it's also a great thing to revisit, maybe on a yearly or every couple of year basis of saying, hey, am I going down the right path? Mm-hmm. Is this still where I want to be spending my time and my energy and my resources?
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. So many times you get so busy with work and job and responsibilities, you don't take the time to just check your own mental health in that field and say, wait a second, is this really what I want to be doing? Or is there just something slightly different that I need to be looking at? No, that's a great point, Royal. What's next?
Well, the other thing I think as you're making this transition, if you haven't already, try to find those mentors that can maybe help guide you and provide you with some well-earned wisdom of what they've seen kind of going before you. That could be a family member, an uncle or an aunt or a grandparent. It could be a professor or a teacher, someone that you respect that might be in the same field, or someone who's has some things going on in their lives that you would like to replicate there. Another great way of finding a mentor is, looking at those organizations that you might belong to. Maybe it's a professional organization, maybe it's a social organization, but just finding that person out there that can be that resource. And I think that the interesting things with mentors are sometimes you will just strike gold and you will find that lifetime mentor who will walk beside you, for the next 20, 30 years. Oftentimes you might just find a mentor for the next, 3 to 5 years or 3 to 5 months. But getting that wisdom from someone who's been down that path before is just so extremely invaluable. I mean, just having the ability to learn from someone else's mistakes, can really save you some time and energy there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the best way. I mean, so we don't make those same mistakes. I wish I'd learned a lot more of those lessons when I was younger, because I made a couple whoppers. So definitely.
Me too.
Yeah. All right. Where are we going from here?
So from here, as you kind of find that next step in your career or that first job, oftentimes you're walking out of college with at least some sort of student debt. Now, hopefully you've been able to manage that over your college career where it's not, $80,000 of student debt for an English degree. In my mind, you can use student debt as a tool to get into the career you want, but you really have to have kind of that foresight to make sure that you've done the planning around it, that you're not taking on so much debt that's just insurmountable. But regardless of that, most people are stepping out of college with that student debt. I think the number one thing you can do is you have to address the debt right away. So most of those student loans become repayable within that first 6 months, depending on the type of loan. So you want to contact the loan servicing company and set up those automatic payments and just begin that. I mean, there is just no reason to, I think, try to game the system or, try to avoid paying that back. Because if you do, it just compounds a problem there.
Yeah.
And there's a whole bunch of different programs out there, like the income-based repayment option, which, is really invaluable for those first, let's say 3 to 4 years out of college, where you're probably not making very much, at least to start. So you have to kind of take the bull by the horns there and just start doing the basics there. I know for me, I didn't do a great job with that. I started to get a couple of letters and go, oh, I should really start taking care of that, since these letters keep getting angrier and angrier.
Yeah, they don't just go away. That's for sure.
That's right. That's right. The other thing is kind of this dealing with your debt is if you haven't already, you're going to be tempted to take on personal, in many cases, revolving debt. That could be credit cards. That's kind of the most insidious form of this personal debt. That can be just a real killer. If you've been able to avoid it through college, at this point, this isn't the time to start, taking in all of those credit card applications and building up a whole bunch of credit that really, as you're just starting off and kind of building out that future, you don't want to kind of saddle yourself with interest payments, and interest rates above 20%. Yeah. It's just a horrible way of getting started there. So really want to encourage people not to feel like they have to get everything right away just because they graduated from college. So that brings us to kind of our next point here, which is starting the process of building your household. Now, probably you're not living in the dorms anymore. Probably you're possibly moving back home, living at home for a time as you get started. Maybe you're going out there and renting an apartment, maybe with roommates or something like that. You're probably not going into buying a house right away, right after school. But that might be something that's very high on your priority list. So if you are looking at buying that home, it's really establishing those first, 1 to 2 years of work history, as well as saving up for that down payment. So if that is kind of your top priority there, you really have to start laying the groundwork for that right away. Now, there's a lot of wisdom there that says, hey, you should buy a home and do that kind of first things first. However, if you think you want to maintain your freedom, I think this is where renting really makes a lot of sense. Because the beautiful thing with rental agreement is you can give 30 days notice and then move someplace else. So especially as you're kind of looking around at your career and kind of mapping that pathway out, don't worry about having to rent a place early on in your 20s. It gives you a lot of freedom there. But at the same time, if it is a priority there to get into a house, starting to set aside money each month into your house fund or your down payment fund is really an essential part of kind of making that next step into home ownership.
Yeah, absolutely. You're setting yourself up for a tremendous, because if you're avoiding things like, what is it, PMI? I believe.
PMI, exactly.
Yeah, you can avoid that by having enough of a down payment.
And PMI is personal mortgage insurance, which is basically an insurance that insures the mortgage for the bank should you default on it.
Exactly.
So it's just an added cost that really doesn't provide any real benefit for you. It's just an added expense for not having enough money to put down on a mortgage.
Yeah, and I think it's 20%, right? If you don't have 20%, then they normally will kick in, make you pay for PMI?
In most cases, yes. Yeah. And that's 20% down or 20% equity in the property is when that PMI will kick in there.
Got it.
The other thing I just want to touch on is early on, you really want to look at your budget. Don't feel like, you can wait to do your budget. Do your budget right away. And I think the biggest cost most people have getting out of school is going to be your housing cost. Mm-hmm. So if you have the opportunity to live at home, live with roommates, finding somewhere where you don't have, anywhere from 40 to 50% of your paycheck going to your living situation, that's going to allow you to build up your emergency fund, build up those bank accounts, and get on your feet, I think, a little bit faster. So even though the idea of moving back home for a year doesn't sound too appealing to most people who've graduated from college, it is something maybe to explore, if you have that opportunity, because it can give you a great springboard into kind of the next phase of your career.
Yeah, absolutely. Set yourself up for success for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you're going to be tempted by, going out there and buying a new car. And it's so easy to walk into a dealership, even with very, very little credit history, and finance a car. It's easy to go down to the Best Buy or wherever and pick up a TV. There's so many things out there that are just going to come along as temptations. And the best thing that you can do is really evaluate, how important is this? Or is there another way for me to get this? So, for instance, with a car, you can go out and usually find a decent used car for a couple $1,000s versus going in, buying a new Toyota for $25,000. TVs, furniture, you can shop around at used furniture stores. Craigslist is a great solution. Look at ways where these aren't the things you're going to buy for the rest of your life. These are things that you're going to use for probably the next, 3 to 5 years. So don't feel like you have to take on a lot of debt to pay for these kind of starter items in your life.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And lastly, you still want to have fun. You still want to go and enjoy things like vacations, like seeing friends. You're going to go through a season there where it seems like every other weekend is a wedding. You'll want to enjoy those things. The biggest thing is begin building a fund that saves for these types of things. Don't think that you can just put it on a credit card and not worry about it. Mm-hmm. They will want their money back.
Yeah. And they usually want it back with a lot of interest.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you make a great point about the vehicle thing as well, just kind of touching back on that. A lot of people look at and say, oh, well, you know what? I can get a new car, but I don't have to pay for it if I just lease it. And wow, I think it is such a trap in a lot of ways. Maybe there's some certain circumstances where a lease is good, especially with a business and so on and so forth. But for the personal use, I think that there is a very, very big problem with that, especially for younger folks that in your area specifically, there is so much to do outside. There are so many things to be able to do and enjoy. Once you realize that you're limited on your mileage, you don't realize exactly how much you're driving, especially once you have a job and you've got a little bit of free money or extra money that you're going to be using for entertainment, and your friends want to go do this, or you find a girlfriend or a boyfriend that's 20, 30 miles away from you and you're driving back and forth all the time. All of a sudden you're getting to the end of your year and you were limited on your miles and you're already over on that first year and you got 2 more years to deal with. That can be a huge trap. So I think it's a good point. Just go for something used, reliable, set yourself up for a solid foundation for the future.
That's right. It just makes so much more sense to look at your 20s as a time to kind of establish the foundation, mm-hmm. versus a time to just start building vertically. You want to establish that foundation of living below your means, establishing good habits when it comes to money, and really focusing on what's truly important to you and what brings you joy and energy, not what the world tells you you should be doing, or what success looks like. The beautiful thing about the world we live in today is everyone gets to define success their own way.
Yep, I agree. And just remember that marketers get paid a ton of money to market products. You don't get paid anything to buy them. That's how the marketers get paid. So there are a lot of people out there trying to sell you everything under the sun, and they're just looking for their next opportunity. So, Royal, you really talked about this foundation. After they've got this foundation of thoughts, where should they be moving at that point?
So really, all along this, it's really looking at building up those accounts to protect you from kind of the worst happening. So that would be your emergency fund. Now, kind of our general rule of thumb is we want 3 to 6 months of living expenses in the bank to cover anything that could come up. Now, one thing I've seen with young people who are still living at home is their living expenses just aren't that much. Mom and dad don't make them pay much rent. They don't have utilities. It's maybe just gas and food. In that case, what I would do is just set a dollar amount there that they should try to save up, maybe $5,000 or $10,000. Because if they take, 3 months of $500, that's just not enough for a major emergency.
Yeah.
And that emergency fund, that's something that if you can establish that habit early, that can really replace the use of credit cards and the use of credit in your life and protect you from all those mistakes that can pop up with kind of the sugar rush that credit cards can give you.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing I would say, and I see this all the time, of people starting a job, becoming eligible for the 401k, and not starting it because they feel they just can't afford it. In reality, especially if you have a 401k that has a match, it really just makes so much sense just to start that as early as possible, just because of the way money compounds over time, that the earlier you can start saving, the better. And I know we talk on this podcast quite a bit about investing and that sort of thing, so I don't want to belabor that. But, getting started in a 401k, or if there's not a 401k available, getting a Roth IRA started individually is a great way of starting to build that wealth for retirement. And then after that, because you are fairly young, there might be some other things that you want to do. Also looking at investing in non-retirement accounts. Once you have that emergency fund established, saving in those after-tax accounts where you can access the money for a new house, a better car, all those other things that'll be coming down the road in the years to come.
And for those that are recently graduated, or if you're going to be sharing this with a family member that is recently graduated or will be graduating soon, just understand that Roth IRAs, there's not a lot of money that you have to put in there on a yearly basis. In fact, it's limited. Is it $6,500 per person now, or is it $7,000 per person?
So for someone under the age of 50, it's $6,000.
So $6,000
for 2019.
Yeah. So, really thinking about it, that's not that much. Even if you don't max it out, at least put something in there. But we're not saying that you have to put $20,000 a year away in a Roth IRA. You just can't. So just think about that as you're weighing your options of what you can do to invest.
So, That's right. Even if you get started at, $50 or $100 a month, that's still establishing those good habits and that foundation that you're looking to build on.
Absolutely. All right. What else? What other tips do you have?
So the other things are just looking at ways of protecting yourself and your family. Kind of some easy tips there is if you are renting, I would really encourage you to just get a renter's insurance policy. Just in case something, there's a break-in or, a fire or anything like that. We're talking something that usually runs maybe $100, $150 a year.
Yeah.
And it's a great way of kind of insuring your things in case the worst happens. The other thing I see quite often is, especially if you're a married couple, get that term life insurance in place as early as possible, just in case, not necessarily that a death occurs, because that would be devastating as well, but there might be a change in your health where you can no longer get the insurance. You might get a diagnosis or be in an accident that you're just not able to get that insurance any longer.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then finally, the one I see The one insurance I see neglected the most is just disability insurance, which is basically the insurance that will pay you if you're ever disabled for the long term. So definitely if you have disability insurance offered through work, it's definitely something to look at and consider seriously, because it can save you in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. That's your biggest asset, right, is yourself. So ensuring that is paramount. All right. What else do we need to cover today, Royal?
Well, I think we covered really how to build that foundation as you're kind of transitioning out of that educational phase of your life into your career phase. So kind of following these steps, kind of taking that step back and looking at your life and what you really want to build. I think that this can give people a good roadmap to kind of building the life that they want to live.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Royal, for your time today.
My pleasure.
All right. And thank you all for listening to the Life by Design podcast with Royal Standley. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Royal comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family. Again, thanks for listening today. For everyone at Oregon Pacific Financial Advisors, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Life by Design podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The views expressed are those of the presenter and may not reflect the views of United Planner Financial Services. Material discussed is meant to provide general information and is not to be construed as specific investment, tax, or legal advice. Individual needs vary and require consideration of your unique objectives and financial situation. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. Advisory services offered through Oregon Pacific Financial Advisors, Inc. Securities offered through United Planner Financial Services of America, member FINRA and SIPC. Oregon Pacific Financial Advisors, Inc. and United Planners Financial Services are independent companies.